The crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow across the ballroom, and I stood there in my white dress, feeling like I was living inside a dream. 3 hours ago, I'd become Mrs. Brandon Cole. 3 hours ago, I'd promised forever to the man I thought was my soulmate. Now that man was standing up, champagne glass in hand, smiling at our 200 guests. "Everyone, if I could have your attention," Brandon's voice boomed through the microphone. His hand was steady, his smile perfect. I smiled back at him, my heart fluttering. This was it, the romantic toast every bride dreams about. "I want to take a moment to talk about love," he began, and the room fell silent. Aunts clutched their napkins. My mother Patricia pressed her hand to her chest, already tearing up. Real love. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that hides in shadows and whispers. I felt my smile falter slightly. What an odd way to phrase it. For 10 years, an entire decade, I've carried feelings for someone in this room. Feelings I couldn't speak out loud. Feelings I had to keep secret. His eyes weren't on me anymore. They were scanning the room, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Brandon," I whispered, but he didn't hear me. "This first dance," he continued, raising his glass higher, "I want to dedicate to the woman I've truly loved all this time, the woman who's been in my heart since the moment I saw her." The room erupted in awes. People were smiling, thinking he was about to say my name in some elaborate romantic gesture. I waited, my hands gripping my bouquet so tight the stems bent. Then Brandon stepped away from the microphone. He walked toward me, and I felt relief flood through my body. This was just his dramatic way of... He walked right past me. The white fabric of my dress swirled as I spun around, watching him move across the floor. My brain couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. He stopped in front of the table where my family sat. He stopped in front of Natalie. My sister stood up slowly, and I saw tears streaming down her face. Not surprised tears, not shocked tears, tears that looked like relief. "Natalie," Brandon said softly, but the microphone still caught it. "I've loved you since the day we met at your father's company party, 10 years ago. I was just an intern then. You probably don't even remember me, but I never forgot you." The room was silent now, confused. People were looking at each other, at me, trying to understand what was happening. Then someone started clapping, then another person. They thought this was some beautiful moment about appreciating family, about honoring the bride's sister. The applause grew, and people were standing, cheering for what they believed was a touching tribute. Natalie reached out and took Brandon's hand, my husband's hand. She was wearing a navy blue dress that she'd spent 3 hours picking out. Her hair was styled in curls that matched mine, and on her wrist, I could see it now. That bracelet. The one Brandon said was custom-made just for me. My best friend Grace grabbed my arm. "Olivia." But I held up my hand. Something was happening inside me. Not heartbreak. Not yet. That would come later. Right now, something else was taking over. Something cold and clear and sharp as glass. I turned away from Brandon and Natalie, away from their joined hands and her knowing smile. I looked at the head table where my parents sat. My mother looked confused, her mouth open in a small O of shock. But my father's face was gray. He was staring at Brandon and Natalie, but his hands were shaking around his champagne glass. He knew. My father knew something. The crowd was still cheering, still clapping for the beautiful moment they thought they were witnessing. I walked toward my father, my heels clicking on the marble floor. The sound cut through the applause, and people started to quiet down, sensing something was wrong. I stopped right in front of Robert Harper and spoke loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Dad, should I tell everyone now, or would you like to?" Brandon's face went completely white. Natalie's legs buckled, and she collapsed onto her chair. 3 years earlier, I was a different person. I believed in coincidences and fate and meant-to-be moments. I was 25, still living at home to save money, working at a tiny design firm that paid barely enough to cover my student loans. That Tuesday morning in October, I was running late for a client presentation. I'd printed my entire portfolio the night before, and I was juggling the folder, my purse, my phone, and a desperate need for coffee. The coffee bean on 5th Street was packed. I squeezed through the door, already rehearsing my order in my head, when someone slammed into me from the side. My portfolio exploded, papers flew everywhere, and my white blouse was suddenly covered in hot caramel latte. "Oh God, I'm so sorry." The voice belonged to a man about my age, with dark hair and the kind of smile that probably got him out of trouble regularly. "I wasn't looking where I was going. Are you okay? Did it burn you?" I looked down at my ruined work, my ruined shirt, my ruined morning. "I have a presentation in 40 minutes. His face flooded with genuine concern. "Let me fix this, please. I'm Brandon, and I'm an idiot who doesn't watch where he's walking." He was already gathering my papers, carefully wiping off the few drops of coffee that had hit them. "What do you need? New shirt? I'll buy you one. New prints? Tell me where and I'll pay for rush printing." "You don't have to." "I absolutely have to. I just destroyed your morning. It's the least I can do." Something about his earnestness made me smile despite everything. "There's a print shop 2 blocks away, and maybe just the coffee replaced. No latte this time." He didn't just pay for new prints. He waited with me, making jokes to calm my nerves, then insisted on calling me a cab to my meeting. Before I left, he handed me his card. "In case the prints aren't perfect and you need new ones, or if you just want to yell at me more thoroughly when you're not rushed." That smile again. "Or maybe, if I'm really lucky, you'd let me buy you dinner to actually apologize properly?" I looked at his card. Brandon Cole, marketing consultant. A local firm I vaguely recognized. "Olivia," I said, taking the card. "I'm Olivia Harper." "Well, Olivia Harper, I promise our next meeting will involve less coffee catastrophe." I made it to my presentation on time. I even landed the client. And 2 days later, I called Brandon. Our first date was at an Italian restaurant downtown. He asked so many questions about my life, my work, my family. I remembered feeling seen, interesting. He wanted to know everything, what I studied, where I grew up, what my parents did for work. "My dad owns a manufacturing company," I told him. "Harper Industries. Nothing huge, but it does well." Something flickered across Brandon's face, but it was gone so fast I thought I'd imagined it. "And siblings?" "One sister, Natalie. She's 2 years younger, living across the state right now, works in event planning." "Are you close?" I hesitated. "We're sisters. It's complicated. She's always been the prettier one, the charming one. I'm the responsible one." Brandon reached across the table and took my hand. "I think you're beautiful." 3 dates turned into 10. 10 turned into sleepovers and meeting friends and spare toothbrushes at each other's apartments. My best friend Grace was the only one who seemed uncertain. "Doesn't it feel a little fast?" she asked one night, watching me get ready for another date with Brandon. "You've known him 2 months and he's already talking about meeting your parents." "He's interested in my life. That's a good thing. He asks a lot of questions about your dad's business. He's in marketing. He's curious about business in general." Grace didn't look convinced, but she dropped it. Brandon met my family at Sunday dinner in December. My mother loved him immediately. My father seemed impressed by his business knowledge, and Natalie, home for the holidays, laughed at everything he said. I found them in the kitchen later, their heads close together, talking quietly. They jumped apart when I walked in. "Just getting to know your sister," Brandon said smoothly, smiling at me. "She's telling me embarrassing stories about you." But Natalie wouldn't meet my eyes. Brandon proposed on a warm evening in April, 18 months after the coffee shop incident. Both our families were gathered at my parents' house for a spring barbecue. He got down on one knee right there on the back patio, with everyone watching. The ring was beautiful. The moment was perfect. Everyone clapped and cried happy tears. Everyone except Natalie. I saw her slip away through the kitchen door while Brandon was still sliding the ring onto my finger. She didn't come back for almost half an hour. When she finally returned, her eyes were puffy and red. "Allergies," she said when my mother asked. "The pollen out here is killing me." But it was early spring. Nothing was blooming yet. The next 6 months became a blur of wedding planning. Venues, caterers, flower arrangements, dress fittings. My mother threw herself into preparations with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Brandon seemed happy to let me make most decisions, though he had strong opinions about the guest list. "We should keep it intimate," he suggested one night, scrolling through the names I'd compiled. "Do we really need all your dad's business associates?" "My parents are paying for half of this. Dad wants his colleagues there." Brandon's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Of course. Whatever makes your family happy." Small things started bothering me. Things I told myself were normal relationship adjustments. Brandon's phone was always face down. Always. On tables, counters, nightstands. When it buzzed, he'd glance at it and flip it back over without showing me the screen. "Work stuff," he'd say. "Boring client messages." He started taking calls in the other room. I'd hear his voice go low and soft through the closed bathroom door, through the bedroom wall when he stepped into the hallway. One weekend, Natalie came home to help with wedding planning. She'd moved back across the state 6 months earlier, taking a job closer to home. Closer to us. "I'll pick her up from the airport," Brandon offered. "You have that fitting appointment anyway." "I can reschedule." "Don't be silly. It's on my way home from the office." Except his office was in the opposite direction from the airport. When they arrived at my apartment 2 hours later, a trip that should have taken 40 minutes, Natalie's lipstick looked freshly applied. Brandon had a coffee stain on his collar that hadn't been there that morning. "Traffic was murder," he explained. Natalie started coming around more often, always offering to help with wedding tasks, but she seemed more interested in other details. "Who's sitting where?" she asked, studying the seating chart I'd spent hours creating. "Does it matter?" "I just want to make sure I'm not stuck at the boring table." She laughed, but her eyes were scanning the chart intently, looking for specific names. Grace pulled me aside one evening after we'd all gone out for drinks. Brandon had left early for an important client call, and Natalie had excused herself shortly after. "I need to tell you something, and you're going to hate me for it." My stomach dropped. "What?" "Last Thursday night. You know when Brandon said he was meeting that client across town?" Grace's voice was quiet, serious. "I saw his car, parked outside Natalie's apartment building, at 9:30 at night. He told me the client lived in that neighborhood." His car was there for 3 hours. I went to that new restaurant on the corner, and when I came out at midnight, he was just leaving. I felt something crack inside my chest. Maybe he was having trouble with the pitch, lost track of time. "With his phone off? I tried to call you that night to see if you wanted to meet up. You said Brandon wasn't answering his phone either." I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to Brandon, listening to him breathe, and wondered what I was missing. The next morning, my mother called. "Sweetie, I was talking to Brandon yesterday about the wedding gift your father and I are planning. He asked the strangest questions." "What kind of questions?" "About your father's will, about how the inheritance is structured, about what happens to the business when your father retires." She laughed nervously. I told him that's not really wedding conversation. My hands went cold. That afternoon, while Brandon was in the shower, I opened his laptop to print our honeymoon itinerary. There was a folder on his desktop labeled NH, Natalie Harper. I stared at that folder for a full minute, my finger hovering over the mouse. Steam from Brandon's shower drifted under the bathroom door. I could hear him humming, completely unaware. I clicked. The folder was locked. Password protected. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Why would Brandon have a locked folder with my sister's initials? I closed the laptop and walked away, but the question ate at me for days. 2 weeks later, I found the hotel receipt. I was taking Brandon's blazer to the dry cleaner when it fell out of the inner pocket. The Riverside Hotel, downtown. A king suite for one night, dated 3 weeks ago, a Thursday. I remembered that Thursday. Brandon had told me he was at a business conference 3 hours north. He'd sent me photos of the conference center, complained about the boring keynote speakers, said he missed me. I called the hotel from my office, my voice shaking. "Hi, I'm confirming a reservation under Brandon Cole from 3 weeks ago. One moment, please." Keys clicking. "Yes, I see it here. King Suite one night. 2 guests checked in at 7 p.m., checked out at 11 a.m. 2 guests. Thank you," I whispered and hung up. When I confronted him that evening, Brandon had an answer ready. He always had answers ready. The conference hotel was fully booked. I had to stay somewhere closer than I thought. "I didn't want to worry you about the drive back being shorter." His face showed perfect concern. "Baby, why are you checking up on me?" The reservation said 2 guests. Norman from work shared the room. Company's cutting costs. You know how it is. Norman, his colleague. It made sense. It should have made sense. But then I noticed the bracelet. Natalie wore it to Sunday dinner, a delicate silver chain with a small diamond pendant. I'd seen it before because I owned the exact same one. Brandon had given it to me for my birthday, telling me it was custom designed, one of a kind, made specially for me. "That's beautiful," I said to Natalie, my voice hollow. "Where'd you get it?" She touched it quickly, protectively. "Oh, just a little gift I bought myself. Saw it online." "Looks expensive." "It was on sale." She changed the subject, but I saw her tuck it under her sleeve. I started watching more carefully. Brandon's phone would light up with messages from N with heart emojis. When I asked, he showed me his contacts. Norman's name, with hearts, because it's a joke at work about how much time we spend together on projects. Every explanation was reasonable. Every excuse made sense in isolation. But together, they formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. I did something I'd never done before. Something that made me feel sick with guilt. I went into my father's home office one afternoon while my parents were out. Robert kept meticulous files on everything: business records, employee files, financial statements. I found what I was looking for in a filing cabinet marked HR Archive. Brandon Cole had applied to work at Harper Industries 2 years and 8 months ago, 6 months before our coffee shop meeting. He'd applied for a junior marketing position. My father had rejected him, noting in the margins, "Overqualified, seems more interested in company financials than actual marketing work." My hands trembled as I kept searching. There were photos from the company's 10th anniversary party, 10 years ago. I flipped through them, seeing younger versions of my parents, employees I didn't recognize. And there, in the background of one photo standing near the refreshment table, Brandon, much younger, barely out of college, but unmistakably him. He'd been an intern that summer. The same summer Natalie had spent hanging around Dad's office, helping with filing work for extra money. She'd been 18, beautiful and bright and seeking attention. He'd known about my family for a decade. He'd researched us, applied to work there, been rejected. Then, accidentally, ran into me at a coffee shop. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called my father's lawyer. "I need to ask you some questions about inheritance law and fraud, and what happens if someone marries into a family under false pretenses." The lawyer recommended a private investigator. I met him in a coffee shop across town where nobody would recognize me, sliding an envelope of cash across the table like I was in some kind of spy movie. "I need to know if my fiancé is having an affair with my sister," I said. The words tasted like poison. His name was Vincent Chen, and he didn't even blink. "How long do you want me to follow them?" "Until the wedding. 2 months. I need proof of everything." What Vincent found was worse than I imagined. He called me 3 weeks later. "We need to meet." The folder he handed me was thick. Hotel receipts going back 26 months. Restaurants. Weekend trips to the coast while Brandon had told me he was visiting his brother. Security camera footage from Natalie's apartment building showing Brandon arriving at night, leaving in the early morning. "They've been careful," Vincent said, "but not careful enough." There were photos. Brandon and Natalie holding hands in a park 2 towns over, kissing in his car outside a movie theater, her head on his shoulder at a restaurant I'd never been to. My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. I couldn't afford to cry yet. "There's more," Vincent said quietly. "Your fiancé has debts, serious ones, gambling. He owes money to some people who don't take kindly to late payments." He showed me statements he'd somehow obtained. Credit cards maxed out. Loans from questionable sources. Brandon was drowning in debt, and he'd hidden it perfectly from me. He researched your family specifically. I traced his internet search history going back 3 years. Harper Industries, your father's net worth, estate planning, Connecticut inheritance laws. The room spun. He targeted me for money. It appears that way. But here's what I don't understand. Why is your sister involved? What does she get out of this? That was the piece I couldn't figure out either, until I kept digging into my family's past. I spent a week going through my father's old files when my parents thought I was at dress fittings and cake tastings. I found documents from 23 years ago, when Harper Industries was on the verge of bankruptcy. There were contracts that didn't make sense, loans with impossible terms that somehow got paid off, accounting records that had been altered, the original numbers still faintly visible beneath whiteout and new entries. My father had committed fraud. Serious fraud. He'd falsified documents to secure a loan that saved his company. The statute of limitations should have run out. But if anyone looked closely at the current company structure, they'd see that parts of it were still built on that original fraudulent foundation. Someone could still destroy him with this information. I found an email, printed and filed away, from 8 months ago. The sender's name had been torn off, but the message was clear. I know what you did in 2001. We should talk about how to keep this quiet. Blackmail. I sat in my father's office, pieces clicking into place like a horrible puzzle. Brandon had discovered Dad's secret somehow. Maybe through his intern work 10 years ago, maybe through research later. He was using it as leverage. Marry into the family, gain access to the money, keep quiet about the fraud. And if anyone questioned him or tried to cut him off, he'd expose Robert and destroy everything. But where did Natalie fit? I called Vincent. I need you to dig into my sister's finances too. What he found made me want to scream. Natalie had credit card debt I didn't know about, failed business ventures. She'd borrowed money from our parents repeatedly, always promising to pay it back, never doing it. She was desperate too, and Brandon had seduced her with promises. The text messages Vincent recovered from her cloud backup told the whole story. Brandon to Natalie. Once I'm married to Olivia, we'll have access to everything. Your father won't dare cut us off or I'll expose him. Then we can be together properly. Natalie to Brandon. What about Olivia? Brandon to Natalie. She's just a means to an end. You're the one I've wanted since the day I saw you 10 years ago. Be patient. I sat in my car outside Vincent's office, staring at those messages until the words blurred. Then I called the lawyer again. I'm not canceling the wedding, I said, but I need you to help my father do something immediately. The lawyer met with my father that same evening. I sat across from Robert Harper in his office, watching his face crumble as I laid out everything I knew. How long have you known about the blackmail? I asked. He aged 10 years in that moment. 8 months. He approached me right after you got engaged, said he'd found irregularities in the company records, that he'd hate for anything to damage the family right when things were so happy. And you didn't tell me. I thought I could handle it, pay him off quietly, keep you safe. His voice broke. I never meant for any of this to touch you. Does Natalie know about the fraud? Brandon told her. She confronted me 2 months ago, crying, saying Brandon had shown her evidence. She begged me not to prosecute him, said they were in love, that they'd keep the secret if I just gave them what they wanted. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. My own sister. Here's what we're going to do, I said, my voice cold and clear. You're going to change your will. Tonight. Cut both Natalie and me down to small trust funds. Everything else goes to charity. The company gets sold to your management team for a fair price, not passed down. Olivia, I can't cut you out. You're not cutting me out. I'm protecting myself. Brandon's marrying me for access to family money. When he finds out there is no money, his leverage disappears. The lawyer nodded approvingly. Smart. We should also prepare a statement about the fraud. Get ahead of it. The statute of limitations has passed on most of it, hasn't it? I'd done my research. Yes, the lawyer confirmed. If your father comes forward voluntarily, shows how he's since made restitution through charitable work and ethical business practices, the damage will be minimal. Embarrassing but not criminal. My father looked broken. I'll lose everything I built. You'll lose everything anyway when Brandon exposes you. This way, you control the narrative. We worked until midnight. The new will was drafted, signed, witnessed. My father wrote a statement confessing to the fraud from 23 years ago, explaining the circumstances, showing proof that the company had long since repaid all affected parties through legitimate means. We'll release this after the wedding, I said. Let Brandon play his hand first. I hired security for the wedding, told them to be discreet but ready. I briefed Grace on everything, asked her to record the reception on her phone every moment. You're actually going through with marrying him? Grace looked horrified. The marriage won't be legal. The lawyer is handling that part. Brandon signed a prenup last month, remember? Except the version he signed isn't actually valid. Small errors in the legal language, easy to annul. You're terrifying when you're angry. I love it. The wedding morning arrived. I put on my white dress, let my mother fuss over my hair, smiled for photos. I felt nothing. No nerves, no joy, just cold determination. I watched Brandon get ready in his suite, looking confident and handsome. I saw Natalie in her navy dress, the one that matched mine, wearing that bracelet. The ceremony passed in a blur. I said vows I didn't mean to a man I didn't know. His kiss felt like a stranger's. At the reception, I watched him watch Natalie. I saw my father's shaking hands, my mother's oblivious happiness. Then Brandon stood up for his toast. My heart hammered, but not from fear, from anticipation. He made his announcement, walked past me, stopped in front of Natalie. The crowd cheered, thinking it was sweet. Natalie took his hand, tears streaming, believing she'd won. I turned to my father. Dad, should I tell everyone now, or would you like to? Robert stood slowly. Brandon's face drained of color. Natalie's legs buckled. I took the microphone from Brandon's abandoned spot. Since my husband seems confused about who he married today, let me clear some things up. My voice carried across the silent ballroom. I know about the affair. I've known for months. I know Brandon targeted my family for money. I know he's been blackmailing my father. I know Natalie helped him. Gasps rippled through the crowd. But here's what Brandon doesn't know. I smiled at him, sharp as broken glass. 6 months ago, my father changed his will. Every penny of his fortune is going to charity. There is no inheritance. There never will be. Natalie screamed. Brandon lunged toward me, but the security guards I'd hired stepped forward immediately, blocking his path. You can't do this. His voice cracked, desperate. That money is... We had an agreement. An agreement? I kept my voice steady, amplified by the microphone. You mean the blackmail? Tell everyone, Brandon. Tell them how you threatened to expose my father's 23-year-old mistake unless he gave you access to the family fortune. My father stood, his face gray but resolute. I committed fraud in 2001 to save my failing company. I've regretted it every day since. I've spent 2 decades making it right through legitimate business and charity work. The statute of limitations has passed, and I'm prepared to face whatever consequences remain. The room erupted in whispers, but I wasn't finished. Vincent, would you come up here, please? The private investigator approached with his folder. I'd warned him he might be needed. These are photos of Brandon and my sister together over the past 2 years. Hotels, restaurants, weekend trips, all while Brandon was engaged to me. I didn't show the photos. I didn't need to. The horrified looks on both their faces confirmed everything. Natalie found her voice, shrill and breaking. He told me he loved me. He said it was always me, that you were just... She stopped, realizing what she was admitting. That I was just a means to an end? I finished for her. I know. I read your text messages, Natalie. All of them. She crumpled into her chair, sobbing. My mother stood frozen, her hand over her mouth. Natalie, how could you? Brandon changed tactics, his voice turning smooth and apologetic. This is all a misunderstanding. Yes, Natalie and I knew each other before, but that toast was just a joke, a tribute to family. Everyone's overreacting. Then explain the hotel receipts, explain the gambling debts. Explain why you applied to work at my father's company 6 months before you accidentally spilled coffee on me. I nodded to Vincent, who pulled out more documents. You researched my family for years. You knew about the fraud, probably found records during your internship a decade ago. You waited, planned, then manufactured a meeting with me. Everything was calculated. Brandon's brother Thomas stood up from the best man's table, his face anguished. I tried to warn you, Olivia. I sent you a message 3 weeks ago, told you Brandon wasn't who he seemed. He intercepted it somehow, deleted it from your phone when you weren't looking. I know, I said gently. I found the deleted messages last week. Thank you for trying. The room was completely silent now, except for Natalie's crying. The marriage will be annulled, I continued. The prenup Brandon signed contains specific legal errors that render it invalid, which also gives grounds for annulment based on fraud. Additionally, Vincent discovered that Brandon forged my father's signature on several documents attempting to access family bank accounts last month. That's actual fraud, the criminal kind. 2 police officers I'd asked to wait outside entered the ballroom. Brandon's face went from white to green. Mr. Cole, we need you to come with us. There are questions about fraudulent documents and identity theft. Brandon tried to run. The security guards caught him in 3 steps. As the officers handcuffed him, he screamed at Natalie. This is your fault. You said she'd never find out. You said she was too stupid and trusting. Natalie wailed louder, and my mother turned away from her, disgusted. My father approached me as they led Brandon out. Olivia, I'm so sorry. For everything. For not protecting you. For the mistakes I made that brought this monster into our lives. You'll make a public statement next week, I said. Full disclosure about 2001. You'll handle whatever comes, and Natalie is out of this family until she gets serious help. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. The guests began filing out, some shocked, some excited by the drama, some offering me sympathetic looks. Grace stayed by my side the entire time. 6 months later, I stood in front of my new design studio, hanging the sign that read, Harper Creative Solutions. I'd used my savings and a loan from Grace to start fresh. Therapy was helping. Slowly, I was learning to trust my instincts again, to see red flags I'd ignored before. The door chimed, and I turned to see Thomas Cole walking in, 2 coffees in hand. Thought you might need caffeine on opening day, he said, nervous but genuine. We'd run into each other a month ago at a coffee shop, the same one where Brandon had staged our first meeting. When Thomas accidentally bumped my arm and apologized profusely, I'd seen real shame in his eyes for his brother's actions. We'd talked for 3 hours that day. Since then, we'd met for coffee twice more. He was nothing like Brandon, quieter, honest about his flaws, working as a teacher because he loved it, not because it paid well. He'd cut contact with his brother completely after the arrest. Thank you, I said, taking the coffee. Our fingers brushed, and I didn't pull away. I know it's complicated, Thomas said quietly. My last name, my brother, everything he did to you. If you want me to leave and never come back, I understand. I looked at him carefully. Really looked. Searching for signs of manipulation, hidden agendas, anything that felt like Brandon. All I saw was a kind man who'd tried to save me from his brother's lies, who'd shown up today with coffee and moral support and no expectations. Stay, I said, but we're taking this slow, really slow. His smile was relieved and genuine. I wouldn't want it any other way. Grace burst through the door, arms full of flowers. Opening day bouquets. Also, you'll never believe this. Natalie apparently checked herself into a treatment facility upstate. Your mom just called. Good, I said simply. Maybe my sister would find real help. Maybe not. Either way, she wasn't my problem anymore. Brandon was facing trial for fraud and forgery. My father's public confession had caused a minor scandal, but his decades of legitimate business and charity work had softened the blow. He'd stepped down as CEO, letting his management team take over, and was volunteering full-time now. My mother was in therapy too, working through her own issues about why she'd pushed both her daughters toward marriages instead of independence. As for me, I was building something real, something mine, something that nobody could take away because it wasn't built on lies or someone else's money or fairy tale delusions. Thomas helped Grace arrange the flowers while I prepped for my first client meeting. When our eyes met across the room, I felt something unexpected. Hope. Not the naive hope of my younger self, the girl who believed in coffee shop fate and perfect romances. This was different. Earned hope, careful hope, the kind that keeps its eyes open and asks questions and doesn't ignore red flags, the kind of hope that knows happy endings aren't given, they're built, carefully and honestly, one true moment at a time. My phone buzzed. My first client was here. I smoothed down my shirt, took a breath, and opened the door to whatever came next. This time, I was ready.